Finding empowerment, embracing layers, yeah. We get to.
Hello, Melissa Crook here with the Feel Podcast, back with some one-on-one time with me this week that I hope you find empowering and supportive. Today, we're going to be touching on using and utilizing and identifying your values, your why, what lights you up, what gets you up every day and makes you feel excited to be alive, motivates you, gives you something to feel purposeful around. And so many times when we go to identify our values or our why, or someone asks us that question, we're not even sure. We haven't stopped to check in for a while. We've followed a script that society has told us it would lead us to success or happiness or contentment, but we never stop to consider if it's actually what we care about, what we are passionate about, what we're aligned with. And or even if we did start there, have we analyzed it lately? And so it gives you a compass, it gives you a foundation to operate from. And it really helps you identify where you need healthy boundaries, where you need to make shifts. And you know when your values are not in alignment. You feel the angst in your soul, but so many times we push it down, we push it back because it's inconvenient, or we don't think we have the time, or we don't think it's a good season to make a change for all kinds of reasons, supporting family, taking care of aging parents. We just started a new job, whatever the case may be, or it makes us feel uncomfortable to think about it. But I know from my own experience that this has so much, no pun intended, value. So I'm really going to challenge you this week to consider this question and really identify those values, that why behind what lights you up every day, and see and check in if you're living your life in alignment with that. Because this can give you such a, like I said earlier, a great foundation to operate from, to know what to say yes and no to. If it's aligned with my values, it's a yes. If it's not aligned with my values, then it's going to have to be a no. And it keeps us and protects us from abandoning ourselves and getting outside of what we have time for, what we have the energy for, around people and places and spaces that may not be as healthy for us, or we may not be healthy for them. I mean, it can go both ways. So we're going to dive into that in this one-on-one conversation today. So to start with, I want you to think about, like I said earlier, do you know what your why is, what your values are? If you have trouble with this, go back and revisit where you set your boundaries and why you set your boundaries there. We've had the boundaries conversation a few times on here. This is something I talk about pretty regularly, but we really visited it hardcore a couple weeks ago. And so maybe going back to that and like, okay, I have these boundaries here. Are they in alignment with my values, or do I need to shift? Or I've got no boundaries at all. So I really need to sit down with myself and identify those values. And it starts with those questions that we refer to throughout this feel framework of what fills my cup, what activities nourish me, how would I describe myself? And then from there, okay, know that I'm getting to know myself in that way. How do I want to feel the next 6 months? Okay, that starts to tell you what you value, what you care about, where you want to be spending your time and energy, what makes you feel alive and focused and purpose-filled. And this just really helps you name what you value. And like I said, it's important to visit this regularly because our ages, our seasons, our locations that we live, our partnerships, our relationships, all of these things over time, whether we have a job change, impact our values, or we just learn more. Life teaches us more. We have wisdom. So then we realize, okay, I'm going to unlearn and relearn some new things here. All these things impact what we value, what our values are. And then there's many of us, there's some core values that will always be a part of us. And that is true. Like I will always, and I'm confident I will always value travel and all that I learn from it. I have and always will be loyal. That's something that's very inherent in me. I'm very passionate about women. That's something that's very inherent in me. But then how I show up in that value, or whether there's others that have been added or removed, may shift over time. So it's really important to revisit this. This can even be more true for your why. So your values, even if your values don't see a lot of shifts, maybe your why behind them changes. Pay attention to your titles, your roles, your locations, changes that happen in the world, in your city, in your family dynamic, knowledge that you've gained. Like I said, those things you're unlearning and relearning and gaining perspective on that have shifted. That may impact, okay, my why here for doing this before was because I was really aligned with this group. Some things have shifted. I'm not as in alignment with them anymore. So my why has shifted. So how do I shift with that to match up my life with where I am now, not where I was 5-10 years ago? If you start feeling uneasy on how you're engaging with your life, that's a clue that it's time to revisit this question. This may also coincide with looking at things that nourish you. Like I said earlier, if you're, revisit that. What nourishes me? Has that changed? How do I describe myself? What else have I learned about myself that would add to how I've described myself? Or have I done some healing in some ways that is making it so I'm not as much one way as I used to be? For me, I am not nearly as, I'm still very passionate, but I'm not nearly as reactive as I used to be. That is a thing that, an adjective that has changed about me. So looking at those things to make sure you're describing yourself currently. If you're describing yourself currently, you're identifying what nourishes you currently. That will then let you know, are my values, the things that I value, that I care about, current with that, or have those shifted too? This can also inform you. Again, I talked about boundaries earlier, but also expectations. I'm living out, if my values are out of date and my why is out of date, I haven't checked in with myself in a while, I'm feeling an angst, I may start unknowingly, we kind of do this subconsciously as we adjust, I may be living out of a system of expectations that aren't really mine. They're my expectations of my former self, but they're not the expectations of my current self. So also making sure that that's in alignment. All these things are tied together. They all connect. They all impact each other. And they're all part of our caring for ourselves well. And these things impact our mental, emotional, physical health when they're not in alignment, when we haven't updated and checked in with ourselves in a while. And make sure these, like I said, these things that you make shifts in, that you are feeling out of alignment with, check in as you're adjusting, that you're not continually trying to satisfy other people, that you're not trying to meet other people's expectations, that you're not trying to not disappoint someone. Make sure, because we hear so many narratives as women, and we start getting them from an early age, it can be really difficult to decipher what is ours versus what is others. And even if we've updated and like, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore, it's easy over time to kind of gradually slip back into some of those things if we're not regularly checking in with ourselves. And so something that I like to do, once a year, sometimes I usually do it around the new year, I'll look at my why, all my values, the things I care about, the work that I'm doing, the way I'm showing up with my relationships, and I'll ask myself, I'll revisit this and be like, am I feeling like I'm still in alignment? Am I still showing up in a way that feels honoring to me? Or there's some things that need to shift? It's just a really healthy way to check in with yourself. And just remember to trust yourself. If you're feeling an angst, it's there for a reason. No one knows you better than you. But that takes time, because sometimes we lose who we are because we have lived according to a value system that was set out for us, or that we've adopted or adapted to because we didn't want to create any friction in an area. But in doing that, we start losing ourselves there's bigger friction down the road when we don't check in to make sure these are our values. These are from us. This is what we truly believe and truly care about. So remember, no one knows you better than you, and that inner knowing will let you know and give you clues that something's out of alignment, out of whack, needs to be checked in with. And make sure that you're retiring, as you check in with yourself, that you are retiring inaccurate narratives that are not healthy for you. You're not treating these things as truth just because it's something that was taught to you or showed to you or modeled to you. It might be a way of doing things and a narrative. That doesn't mean it's healthy for you or true for you. So retiring those inaccurate narratives, naming them as inaccurate, renaming what is true for you. And that can take time and practice. So when you're practicing and communicating, this is what I value. This is what I care about. Yes, I know it's a shift, but as I've continued to get to know myself and lean in and trust what my body and my inner knowing is telling me, then I know this is the trajectory that is healthy for me. I hope you can honor that. Because again, as we make these shifts, it's really important to communicate that as we are doing this, because people aren't mind readers. And these things do require communication and connection and action that is consistent. No more abandoning ourselves in order to please others. When we know what our values are, when we know what we care about, what is in alignment with us, it gives us, again, I said earlier, that foundation, that framework to know what it is we're saying yes and no to. I was having a great conversation with a future guest today as I was recording earlier today. Her name's Eva Kennedy. You're going to hear from her this summer. And we talked a lot about this, the importance of the values, and that when you know what to say yes and no to, you're no longer abandoning yourself. She took some time to really sit with herself during her life to really evaluate that. And it just clarifies everything for you. All right. Some ways to engage with this as we get ready to wrap up this conversation about identifying our why and our values. And some of this is going to be what I've repeated earlier in this conversation, but I'm repeating it for the sake of importance. I want to make sure that that you grab onto this and really hear this today. If you're having trouble identifying your why, revisit what activities and causes nourish you, fill your cup, make you feel alive. Think about those 5 words that describe how you want to feel the next 6 months. And where are your values in relation to those? Does there need to be any adjustments there? Use those answers to help narrow this down. Kind of retire what is no longer true and usher in what is now true. Ask yourself if what you're engaged with currently is aligned with this. So going and looking at that calendar, that spaces and places you're giving your time and energy to. Where do they need to be some shifts? Sometimes these can be difficult questions and difficult decisions. It may need you time to put a plan in place. I'm like, you know what? I've been on this board now, but this nonprofit and I were no longer in an alignment. So how do I start the process of not leaving them in a lurch, but making the natural progression of moving away from that cause and moving into something that is more aligned in a way that allows them to replace me, but also is honoring me. So these aren't always things that we can make overnight, but that's an example of something you start putting a plan in place and seeing some progress and moving towards what is actually in alignment with your current self in this time frame. This can also really help, again, when you revisit your healthy boundaries and living out of your own expectations, your values, your healthy boundaries, and your living out of your own expectations versus others are all tied in. Identifying those values gives clarity to whether you are living out of yours or someone else's expectations and where you need to set those healthy boundaries. It just gives you that foundation to operate from. I hope you found this helpful today. I hope you found it supportive. This is springtime. As we're doing our spring cleaning, sometimes it's the spring cleaning is within our minds and our calendars and checking in with ourselves and refreshing and renewing and meeting ourselves where we are today. So check in with yourself this week and make sure that you are up to date with yourself and are operating from where you currently live, from where you currently live your life with, and whether it's a spatial location or whether it's in your belief systems, the things that you've learned and unlearned, all those things. Check in with yourself today and use this as a tool to guide you to live in alignment and show up as your healthiest, most authentic self. You are valuable, you are worthy, and you get to choose. Take good care of yourself, and we'll see you next time here on the Feel Podcast.